The courtroom fell silent as the judge leaned forward, contempt visible in his eyes. "Lieutenant Commander, hand over that medal," he ordered. She stood motionless, the silver star gleaming under harsh lights. The same one awarded after she dragged 3 men through enemy fire with a shattered leg. Everyone watched as she finally unpinned it, placed it on the bench, saluted crisply, and walked away without a word. That night, as media praised the judge for upholding discipline, an encrypted file surfaced online. Within hours, his face vanished from the courthouse website. No one expected what would happen next. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing to see more stories about unsung heroes who restore our faith in justice. The fluorescent lights of the courthouse reflected off polished marble floors, creating a sterile, institutional glow. Lieutenant Commander Tyrannus Blackwood moved through security with deliberate steps, her gait revealing nothing of the prosthetic leg hidden beneath her uniform pants. The naval dress blues she wore were impeccable, pressed to razor-sharp creases, with service ribbons and medals arranged precisely according to regulation. The silver star hung prominently among them, catching the light as she passed. Court officers and civilian staff watched her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Some nodded slightly in acknowledgement of her uniform. Blackwood returned none of these gestures, her face composed in what her fellow SEALs called her mission mask, utterly unreadable, focused only on what lay ahead. She checked her watch. 15 minutes early. Perfect. Blackwood never arrived exactly on time for anything. In the teams, being on time meant being late, and old habits died hard. The courtroom doors remained closed, so she took a seat on a nearby bench, back straight, hands resting lightly on her knees. A court clerk emerged from a side door, clipboard in hand. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood?" When Tyrannus stood, the clerk continued. "Judge Hargrove would like to see you in chambers before the hearing." Blackwood nodded and followed the clerk down a side corridor. Her expression never changed, but internally, her tactical assessment shifted. Unscheduled pre-hearing meeting, unusual protocol, potential advantage or trap. Judge Eldon Hargrove's chambers were exactly what one would expect. Leather-bound law books, polished wood, framed degrees and commendations. The man himself sat behind an imposing desk, reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he reviewed a file. He didn't look up immediately when Blackwood entered. "Lieutenant Commander," he finally acknowledged, removing his glasses. "Thank you for arriving promptly." "Yes, sir." Blackwood remained standing at parade rest. Hargrove studied her for a moment, his eyes briefly landing on the silver star before returning to her face. "I wanted a word before we begin. This hearing concerns matters of national security, classified operations, and military protocol. I expect complete candor and cooperation." "Understood, sir." "Good." Hargrove closed the file on his desk. "The court recognizes your service record, Commander. It's impressive. But I want to be clear. Decoration does not place anyone above military law or chain of command." Blackwood's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I've never considered myself above anything, sir." "Then we should proceed smoothly." Hargrove stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "We convene in 5 minutes." As Blackwood turned to leave, Hargrove added, "And, Commander, the courtroom will have media present. This hearing has attracted attention." Of course it had. Blackwood didn't acknowledge the statement as she left the chambers, but her mind was already calculating what this meant. Media presence suggested this wasn't just about military oversight. It was about public perception. Someone wanted an audience. Courtroom 217 was modestly sized but formal, with the elevated bench dominating the front. By the time Blackwood entered, the gallery held about 20 people, a few in military uniform, others in civilian clothes with press credentials. She recognized a reporter from the Washington Post, another from the Military Times. Blackwood took her position at the defendant's table, alone. No attorney, her decision. This wasn't about legal maneuvering, but about truth, and she would stand by her actions without filter or interpretation. The gallery murmured slightly at this unusual choice. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Hargrove entered. Military Oversight Hearing 217B is now in session. The matter before this court concerns Operation Broken Arrow and the actions of Lieutenant Commander Tyrannus Blackwood, Navy SEAL Team 6. Hargrove continued. This proceeding will remain unclassified whenever possible. When classified information must be discussed, the court will be cleared of all non-essential personnel. He looked toward the gallery. That means the press will be asked to leave at certain points. This is non-negotiable. Blackwood's gaze drifted briefly to a specific spot in the gallery, an empty seat between two naval officers in dress uniform, the seat that should have been filled. Her attention snapped back to the front as Hargrove began. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, you are appearing before this oversight committee regarding decisions made during Operation Broken Arrow on April 17th of last year. The operation involved extraction of high-value intelligence assets from a hostile region. During this operation, you allegedly deviated from mission parameters and directly contravened standing orders. Is this understanding correct? Partially correct, sir, Blackwood replied, her voice steady. Hargrove's eyebrow raised slightly. Explain. I deviated from mission parameters when the situation on the ground made the original plan untenable. The decision was made to preserve both the mission objective and the lives of personnel under my command. So, you unilaterally decided to override the operational directives provided by CENTCOM? I adapted to changing conditions, as we are trained to do. Hargrove leaned forward. Commander Blackwood, please answer the specific question. Did you override CENTCOM directives? Yes, sir, I did. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Hargrove let it fade before continuing. And are you aware that this decision resulted in compromise of secondary operational objectives in the region? Blackwood's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm aware of the official assessment, yes. That's not what I asked. Are you aware that your decision compromised other operations? With respect, sir, correlation is not causation. The after-action report makes assumptions about causality that are not supported by the full operational data. Hargrove's expression hardened. This court is not interested in your interpretation of the data, Commander. We are interested in your actions and their consequences. Then may I present the complete operational data to provide context for my actions? The after-action report is already in evidence. The redacted version, sir. I'm referring to the complete operational log, including CENTCOM communications during the critical period. Hargrove shuffled papers on his desk. That won't be necessary at this stage. The court will first establish the basic facts of your actions before considering mitigating factors. Blackwood remained silent, but the slight straightening of her posture spoke volumes to those familiar with military bearing. She was digging in. The judge continued questioning for nearly an hour, establishing the timeline of the operation, at least the parts that could be discussed in open court. When they reached the critical decision point, Hargrove called for the courtroom to be cleared of media and non-essential personnel. Once only military officials with appropriate clearance remained, the real examination began. Commander Blackwood, at 02:17 hours, you received orders to maintain your position and await extraction at the designated point. Instead, your team moved 3 kilometers east into Sector 47B. Why? Because intelligence from the asset we were extracting indicated an enemy quick reaction force was moving toward our designated extraction point. Satellite confirmation was unavailable due to weather, but the asset's information had proven reliable throughout the operation. So you abandoned the extraction plan based on unverified intelligence from a source whose reliability was still being established? No, sir. I adjusted the extraction plan based on tactical assessment of all available information. Hargrove consulted a document. According to communications logs, you were explicitly ordered to maintain position, regardless of the assets. Claims. That is correct. And you disregarded this direct order. I made a tactical decision that the order had been issued without complete awareness of ground conditions. That wasn't your determination to make, Commander. Blackwood's voice remained level. With respect, sir, field commanders are expected to exercise judgment when operational conditions change. That's why command school teaches that orders are guidelines in dynamic combat situations, not absolute directives when lives are at immediate risk. A muscle in Hargrove's jaw twitched. Are you lecturing the court on military protocol, Commander? No, sir. I'm explaining the basis for my decision. The questioning continued, growing increasingly technical about tactical decisions, communications protocols, and chain of command. Throughout, Blackwood remained composed, answering precisely and without defensiveness. Only once did her composure slip, when Hargrove referred to acceptable casualties. in high-risk extractions. "There is no such thing as an acceptable casualty when alternatives exist, sir," she said, a hint of steel entering her voice. The courtroom recessed for lunch. Blackwood sat alone in a small consultation room, declining offers of company from supportive officers. She removed a photograph from her uniform pocket. 5 men in desert camouflage, arms around each other's shoulders, faces grimy but grinning. She touched each face briefly before returning the photo to her pocket. When the hearing resumed, Admiral Quinlan was called to testify regarding Blackwood's service record and standing protocols for special operations. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood has served with exceptional distinction," the Admiral stated. Her record includes 17 high-risk extractions, 32 successful intelligence operations, and the highest commendations for leadership under fire. "And yet," Hargrove interjected, "even exemplary officers must respect command structures. Would you agree, Admiral?" "I would, Your Honor. The chain of command exists for a reason." "And what is that reason, for the record?" "To ensure coordinated action across multiple operational theaters, strategic consistency, and appropriate risk management." Hargrove nodded. "Thank you, Admiral. No further questions." As the Admiral stepped down, he briefly met Blackwood's eyes. His expression revealed nothing, but there was something in the set of his shoulders that suggested discomfort with his limited testimony. The afternoon session continued with technical witnesses and review of redacted mission documents. As the day wore on, Blackwood noticed Hargrove occasionally touching a scar at his right temple, a thin white line partially hidden by his hair. The gesture seemed unconscious, occurring primarily when discussion turned to the extraction phase of the operation. Finally, Hargrove called Blackwood back to the stand for concluding questions. "Commander, after reviewing the evidence and testimony today, do you maintain that your decision to override CENTCOM directives was justified?" Blackwood met his gaze directly. "Yes, sir, I do. Even knowing the consequences?" "Especially knowing the consequences, sir." Hargrove frowned. "Explain." "My team successfully extracted the high-value asset with critical intelligence on enemy weapons capabilities. That intelligence has since been verified and acted upon, preventing multiple attacks on U.S. forces. The cost was high, but the alternative would have been mission failure and likely total loss of both the asset and my team." "That's your assessment?" "CENTCOM's analysis suggests the designated extraction plan had a high probability of success." "CENTCOM wasn't on the ground, sir. I was." The courtroom fell silent at the simple statement. Hargrove's face darkened slightly, and he touched the scar at his temple again. "Commander Blackwood, this hearing has established that you deliberately contravened direct orders, potentially compromised parallel operations, and exercised authority beyond your operational mandate. Do you have anything to add before the court renders its finding?" Blackwood stood straighter. "Only this, sir. I would make the same decision again under the same circumstances. My responsibility was to my mission and my men. I stand by both." Hargrove was silent for a long moment, studying her. Then he shuffled his papers and cleared his throat. "This court finds that Lieutenant Commander Blackwood's actions during Operation Broken Arrow constitute a breach of protocol requiring disciplinary action. While the court acknowledges the successful extraction of the intelligence asset, the manner of achievement demonstrated a disregard for chain of command that cannot be overlooked in special operations." Blackwood's expression never changed, though something in her eyes hardened. "As part of this court's ruling, I am ordering the temporary surrender of your Silver Star Medal, pending full investigation of Operation Broken Arrow and all related actions." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Cameras flashed from the media section. Blackwood remained perfectly still. "The medal was awarded for actions during a previous operation," she said quietly. "The medal represents the highest ideals of military service, including adherence to command structure," Hargrove replied. "Until this matter is fully resolved, the court deems it inappropriate for you to continue wearing it." Blackwood's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "Sir, with respect, this medal was awarded for actions that saved 37 lives. It honors not just my service, but the sacrifice of the men who died making that mission succeed. That's not for you to decide, Commander. The medal. Now." The courtroom fell completely silent. Blackwood stood with military precision, her movements deliberate. She unpinned the silver star from her uniform, the small metallic sound audible in the hushed room. She placed it on the bench, rendered a perfect salute, and turned on her heel. As she walked out, cameras continued flashing, but she looked at no one. Her face revealed nothing, but those who knew her best would have recognized the particular emptiness in her eyes. The same look she had worn when returning from Broken Arrow, with a shattered leg and 3 fewer team members. Evening found Blackwood in her quarters at Naval Support Facility Anacostia. The room was Spartan, bed made with military precision, minimal personal items, everything in its place. The only decoration was a shadow box containing unit insignia and a folded flag. Her phone had been buzzing steadily with messages of support from fellow SEALs and military personnel who had heard about the hearing. She read them all but responded to none. What was there to say? The system had worked exactly as expected. She opened her closet and removed her medal case. The space where the silver star should rest was conspicuously empty. She ran her finger along the velvet lining before closing the case and returning it to the shelf. Sitting at her desk, Blackwood powered up a secured laptop. The login screen glowed blue in the dimming room. She hadn't bothered to turn on the lights as evening fell. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, bypassing standard protocols with specialized access codes known only to her unit. The screen displayed Operation Broken Arrow, Command, Log, Clearance Level, Top Secret. She navigated through encrypted files, pulling together pieces from separate security compartments. Mission parameters, communications logs, medical reports, after-action assessments. The complete picture that no single review had ever assembled. In the laptop screen's reflection, a photograph on her desk was visible. Blackwood with her SEAL team, arms around each other's shoulders, and standing slightly apart, a younger Colonel Eldon Hargrove in desert camouflage before he became a judge, before the scar at his temple. Before Operation Broken Arrow changed everything. Blackwood's fingers paused over the keyboard as she looked at the reflection. Her face hardened with resolve as she continued typing. Declassification override, Onyx Leader 779, authorization, Blackwood, TL. A warning appeared. Unauthorized declassification of these materials constitutes a violation of national security protocols. Blackwood didn't hesitate. She entered a final confirmation code and watched as the screen displayed encryption protocols engaged. Secure transmission initiated. A progress bar appeared, filling slowly as the files were packaged and transmitted through channels that would be nearly impossible to trace. When it completed, the screen flashed, transmission complete. Blackwood closed the laptop and whispered into the darkness of her room. This isn't about my medal, sir. It's about the 3 body bags you pretended never came home. She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the lights of Washington, D.C. in the distance. Whatever came next, court-martial, dishonorable discharge, worse, it didn't matter. The truth would have its day. She had made a promise over 3 graves that their deaths wouldn't be redacted from history like inconvenient footnotes. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tonight, for the first time since returning from that blood-soaked operation, Lieutenant Commander Tyrannus Blackwood felt something close to peace. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up for what's right when it costs them everything? Let me know in the comments and subscribe if you want to see what happens next in this story of sacrifice and justice. Judge Eldon Hargrove was awakened by his phone's insistent buzzing at 5:17 a.m. The device vibrated across his nightstand like an angry insect, notifications lighting up the pre-dawn darkness of his bedroom. He reached for it groggily, squinting at the screen. 15 missed calls, dozens of text messages, and an email inbox overflowing with unread messages. The most recent text was from his judicial clerk. "Sir, turn on the news. Now." Something cold settled in Hargrove's stomach as he fumbled for the remote. The television flickered to life, already tuned to a 24-hour news channel. His own face stared back at him from the screen, alongside a military photograph of Lieutenant Commander Blackwood in combat gear. The caption beneath read, "Judge accused of denying critical medevac during deadly mission." "This can't be happening," he whispered, turning up the volume. The news anchor's voice filled the room. "Breaking overnight, Classified military documents have surfaced online, appearing to show that federal judge Eldon Hargrove, while serving as a CENTCOM operations controller, denied emergency evacuation for a Navy SEAL team under heavy fire. 3 team members died during the operation known as Broken Arrow. The sole survivor of that team, Lieutenant Commander Tyrannus Blackwood, appeared yesterday before Judge Hargrove in a military oversight hearing, where she was ordered to surrender her Silver Star Medal. Hargrove's phone rang again, his aide sounding panicked. "Sir, I've been trying to reach you for hours. There's been a situation." "I'm looking at it right now," Hargrove replied, his voice tight. "It's worse than what's on TV, sir. The documents are everywhere online. They show communications logs, operational directives, medical reports. They show you specifically denied extraction for Blackwood's team, despite multiple requests for emergency evacuation." Hargrove's hand went instinctively to the scar at his temple. "That's impossible. Those files were sealed by the secretary himself. Level 10 classification." "Well, they're not sealed anymore, sir. CNN has them. Fox has them. The New York Times is running a front-page story for their morning edition. And social media is on fire." "How the hell did this happen?" The aide hesitated. "The files were encrypted with a SEAL Team 6 authentication code, specifically Onyx Team's code." Hargrove closed his eyes, realization dawning. "Blackwood?" "Sir, the White House is requesting a statement. So is the Department of Defense, and the Judicial Ethics Committee has already announced a preliminary investigation. Tell them I'll issue a statement by noon. I need to consult with counsel first." After ending the call, Hargrove sat on the edge of his bed, mind racing. The classified files had been locked away, accessible only to a handful of people with appropriate clearance. Even Blackwood shouldn't have had access to the complete operational record. Unless... He dressed quickly and was heading for his car when another call came through. Admiral Quinlan. "I assume you've seen the news," the Admiral said without preamble. "I have. This is a clear violation of national security protocols. Blackwood should be arrested immediately." "That's not going to happen, Eldon." "What are you talking about? She leaked classified information?" "The Pentagon is more concerned with the content of those leaks than their source right now. There's an emergency briefing in 30 minutes. I suggest you get here." Hargrove arrived at the Pentagon to find the situation even worse than he had imagined. The briefing room was filled with military officials in various states of crisis management. Screens displayed the classified documents now trending across the internet and being discussed on every major news network. Admiral Quinlan stood at the front of the room, reviewing the files with a grim expression. "These are authentic, every last one of them." A junior officer added, "We've verified the authentication codes. They were released using proper declassification protocols, but through an emergency override system designed for battlefield contingencies. That system is only supposed to be accessible in active combat zones," someone objected. "Theoretically, yes, but Commander Blackwood apparently found a workaround." Quinlan held up a hand. "The source of the leak is secondary at this point. We need to address the content. These documents paint a clear picture. Colonel Hargrove, as CENTCOM operations controller, denied emergency extraction for a SEAL team under heavy fire, despite multiple requests and clear evidence of casualties." All eyes turned to Hargrove. "I was following protocol," he said defensively. "The extraction would have compromised ongoing surveillance of high-value targets in the region. And now 3 dead SEALs in a public relations nightmare are compromising a lot more," Quinlan replied. "The Secretary of Defense wants options on his desk in 1 hour. Judge Hargrove, I suggest you prepare a comprehensive explanation of your decision-making process during Operation Broken Arrow." Across town, Senator Zaria Khalidi was reviewing the same documents with her staff. As chair of the Armed Services Committee, she had been awakened with the news and had immediately called an emergency meeting. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, scanning through the files on her tablet. "Hargrove blocked the medevac that could have saved those SEALs, then presided over a case involving the sole survivor? This isn't just a conflict of interest, it's obstruction." Her aide nodded. "It gets worse, Senator. The Blackwood hearing wasn't randomly assigned. According to the court docket records, Hargrove specifically requested it." Khalidi looked up sharply. "He requested it? Why would he do that unless he was trying to control the narrative?" "Unknown, ma'am, but there's something else." Hargrove was on the shortlist for the next Supreme Court vacancy. The White House has been vetting him for months. Khalidi's expression hardened. Find out everything you can about Operation Broken Arrow. I want to know what really happened out there, who gave the orders, and why Hargrove was so determined to face Blackwood in that courtroom. The Naval Medical Center's physical therapy wing was quiet at this early hour. Most patients were still asleep, but Lieutenant Commander Tyrannus Blackwood had been there since 5 a.m., pushing through her rehabilitation exercises with single-minded focus. Her prosthetic leg lay on a bench nearby as she worked on strengthening her residual limb, sweat beading on her forehead, despite the room's cool temperature. She didn't look up when the door opened, already recognizing the footsteps of Commander Isra Nazarian, her former operations officer, and one of the few people Blackwood still considered a friend. "You're here early," Nazarian observed, leaning against the doorframe. "Couldn't sleep," Blackwood replied, continuing her exercises. "I imagine not. Have you seen the news? Don't watch it much these days." Nazarian moved further into the room. "The Judge Advocate General is looking for you. The files, Tyrannus. They know it was you." Blackwood finally paused, meeting Nazarian's eyes. "Do they have proof?" "No, but they know." Blackwood resumed her exercises, her movements controlled and precise. "Then they'll have to keep looking. This isn't a game. What you did could be considered treason. What Hargrove did was treason. I just exposed it." Nazarian lowered her voice, though they were alone in the therapy room. "You were the only survivor of Onyx Team, the only one who made it back from that hellhole after dragging Kapoor and Rivas through 2 miles of enemy territory with a shattered leg. You called for emergency extraction 6 times, 6 times, Tyrannus, and every time Hargrove denied it." "I remember," Blackwood said quietly. "I don't need the reminder." "Then why wait until now? It's been 8 months since Broken Arrow." Blackwood's eyes hardened. "Because I needed to understand why. I needed to know if there was a legitimate reason 3 good men died while I lived. I needed to be sure before I acted." "And now you are?" "Now I am." Nazarian sighed, running a hand through her short black hair. "There's more. Hargrove was on a shortlist for the Supreme Court. This leak has ended that, permanently." Blackwood reached for a towel, wiping sweat from her face. "I didn't do this for revenge." "Maybe not, but Hargrove will see it that way, and so will a lot of other people." Across all major networks and social media platforms, the story was exploding. Military analysts dissected the leaked documents on morning shows. Veterans groups issued statements demanding accountability. And Hargrove's official statement was being picked apart, word by word. "As a CENTCOM operations controller during Operation Broken Arrow, I made difficult decisions based on the totality of the strategic situation," the statement read. "While I deeply regret the loss of life that occurred, battlefield decisions require weighing multiple factors beyond the immediate tactical situation. I categorically deny any personal animus in yesterday's hearing regarding Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, and I am cooperating fully with all investigations into this matter." Former SEALs appeared on news programs, explaining the unwritten code that bound their community together. "You never leave your people behind. That's fundamental. To a SEAL, there's no greater betrayal than abandoning your teammates when they need extraction." Public opinion was turning rapidly against Hargrove. Social media hashtags like "Justice for Onyx Team" and "Give Back the Medal" were trending nationally. Veterans organizations were organizing protests outside the courthouse. In his chambers, Hargrove met with his attorney and a political consultant. The atmosphere was grim. "They can't prove it was Blackwood," his lawyer insisted. "The encryption protocols make it virtually impossible to trace the source definitively." "They don't need to prove it in court," the consultant countered. "The public has already decided. Your judicial career is effectively over, and any political aspirations are dead in the water." Hargrove paced the length of his office. "There has to be some way to control this narrative. The documents only tell part of the story. They don't show the larger operational picture, the other missions that would have been compromised if I'd authorized that extraction." "With respect, sir, that's not going to matter to most people," the consultant said. "What they see is a judge who left soldiers to die and then had the audacity to preside over a hearing involving the sole survivor. It looks vindictive. It looks personal." "It wasn't personal," Hargrove snapped. "It was never personal." A knock interrupted them. His clerk entered, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood." Hargrove froze mid-stride. "Blackwood is here? Now?" "Yes, sir. She's waiting outside." Hargrove exchanged glances with his advisors, then straightened his robe and adjusted his tie. "Send her in." Blackwood entered alone, still in her uniform but without the silver star. Despite everything, she rendered a proper military courtesy upon entering, acknowledging his position, if not the man himself. "Commander Blackwood," Hargrove said, his voice carefully controlled, "I assume you've come to witness the damage firsthand." "No, sir," she replied, her voice steady. "I came to return this." She placed a small flash drive on his desk. Hargrove stared at it suspiciously. "What is this?" "The only copy of the full mission report. The one that shows you weren't the only one who denied our extraction. The one that proves you were following direct orders from above." A heavy silence filled the room. Hargrove's advisors exchanged alarmed glances. "We should continue this conversation privately," Hargrove said. When his attorney began to object, he added, "That's an order, counselor." Once they were alone, Hargrove studied Blackwood with new wariness. "Why would you do this? Why bring me this information now, after what you've already released?" "Because destroying you doesn't bring my team back," Blackwood said simply. "And because there's something you need to see." She activated a tablet she had brought with her, placing it on the desk between them. The screen showed helmet cam footage from Operation Broken Arrow. The timestamp indicated it was from the final hours of the mission. The footage showed Blackwood, face streaked with blood and dirt, dragging a wounded teammate through rocky terrain. Gunfire echoed in the background. The camera occasionally caught glimpses of another wounded SEAL being carried across her shoulders, despite her own visibly mangled leg. Over the comms, her voice, strained but controlled. "Command, this is Onyx Leader. We need immediate extraction. I have 2 critical, 1 KIA, coordinates to follow." A voice responded. Hargrove's. "Negative, Onyx team. Extraction denied. Operation security compromised." Blackwood's recorded voice. "Sir, we have wounded. We can't hold this position." Hargrove, after a pause. "I understand, Lieutenant, but I have direct orders. Maintain position and continue evasive maneuvers." The footage continued, showing Blackwood positioning herself to shield her wounded teammates as enemy fire intensified. The audio captured her final transmission. "Command, if you're monitoring, tell their families. Tell them they never stopped fighting." Hargrove watched, his face growing increasingly pale. When the footage ended, he looked up at Blackwood standing before him, the same woman, but fundamentally changed by the events they were witnessing. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked quietly. "Because you need to understand something, sir," Blackwood said, her voice level but intense. "I didn't come back from that mission angry that we were denied extraction. I came back angry that the men who died under my command were erased, their sacrifice classified, their families told nothing but lies." She leaned forward slightly. "You took my medal yesterday because you thought I was a threat to the system. But I don't care about medals or recognition. I care that the men who died that day had names. Staff Sergeant Elijah Kapoor, Chief Petty Officer Mateo Rivas, Lieutenant Kaleo Nakamura." Hargrove's professional facade finally cracked. "I had orders, Commander, direct from the Secretary." "I know," she replied. "The same secretary who's now denying any knowledge of the operation. The same one who's preparing to throw you under the bus while he preserves his own political future." A knock on the door interrupted them. Hargrove's clerk entered, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Sir, Admiral Quinlan is here with Senator Khalidi. They say it's urgent." Hargrove glanced at Blackwood, a moment of silent communication passing between them. She gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "Send them in," he said. Admiral Quinlan entered first, followed by Senator Khalidi. Both looked surprised to find Blackwood already there. Quinlan spoke first. "Judge Hargrove, the Armed Services Committee has questions about Operation Broken Arrow." "I imagine they do," Hargrove replied. He looked at Blackwood, who had stepped back and was preparing to leave. "Wait." He opened his desk drawer and removed her silver star. Standing, he approached Blackwood and, with careful, deliberate movements, pinned the medal back on her uniform. "This doesn't belong to me," he said quietly. "Nor does it solely belong to you. I understand that now." Blackwood's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in her eyes. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition of a truth acknowledged. Hargrove turned to Quinlan and Khalidi. I believe I have some explaining to do, and it starts with acknowledging the truth about what happened to Onyx's team. As Blackwood left the chambers, she walked through the courthouse hallway where a group of military personnel had gathered, some from the hearing, others who had come after seeing the news. As she passed, each one stood at attention. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. Some honors transcend medals. The footage from Hargrove's chambers somehow leaked that afternoon, going viral across social media and news outlets. The image of the judge returning the Silver Star became symbolic, not of absolution, but of truth finally acknowledged. 1 week later, Blackwood found herself in a congressional hearing room, testifying before Senator Khalidi's committee. The focus was no longer on her actions, but on the chain of command failures that led to the Broken Arrow disaster. Lieutenant Commander, Senator Khalidi asked, in your professional assessment, what systemic issues allowed these communication and command failures to occur? Blackwood's testimony was measured and technical, focused on protocols rather than personalities. She spoke about information silos between operational theaters, about how classification levels sometimes prevented effective coordination, about the need for clearer emergency override procedures when lives were at immediate risk. When asked directly if she had leaked the classified documents, she answered simply, I believe in accountability, Senator, at all levels. Khalidi seemed to understand the non-answer for what it was. And what about personal accountability, Commander? Do you believe Judge Hargrove should be held personally responsible for the deaths of your team members? Blackwood paused, considering her words carefully. Judge Hargrove was one link in a chain of command that failed that day. Focusing exclusively on him would miss the larger systemic failures that need to be addressed. That's a very diplomatic answer, Commander. It's an honest one, Senator. Revenge is easy. Reform is harder. As the hearings continued over subsequent days, more details emerged about Operation Broken Arrow. The Secretary of Defense was called to testify, as were other high-ranking officials involved in the operational decisions. The full picture was one of cascading failures, territorial disputes between agencies, and communication breakdowns that ultimately cost 3 lives. Through it all, Blackwood remained composed, her testimony factual and focused on improvements rather than blame. Veterans groups rallied around her, but she declined all interview requests and public appearances. This wasn't about her, she insisted. It was about the truth. On a crisp autumn evening, Blackwood stood before 3 fresh headstones at Arlington National Cemetery. The graves had been there for months, but the headstones were new, now properly marked with Killed in Action, Operation Broken Arrow, rather than the vague died in service to their country that had originally been engraved. Other SEALs gathered silently around her, forming a circle of respect around the graves. Among them, unexpectedly, was Judge Hargrove, now in civilian clothes. He approached after the others had paid their respects and begun to disperse. The secretary resigned this morning, he said quietly. I heard. And the Judicial Ethics Committee has recommended my recusal from all military oversight cases pending further review. Blackwood nodded but said nothing. Commander? Hargrove hesitated, searching for words. Why did you come to my chambers that day? You could have let me fall. After what I did, most would say I deserved it. Blackwood looked at him directly. Because revenge is easy, sir. Justice is harder. She touched one of the headstones gently. And they deserve justice, not revenge. Hargrove nodded, understanding the distinction. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the hearing, but for that day, for not finding another way. There's always another way, Blackwood replied. We just have to be willing to see it. 1 month later, Blackwood reported for a new assignment at the Naval Special Warfare Command. Her prosthetic leg was now a familiar part of her gait steady and confident as she entered the training facility, where a group of SEAL candidates waited at attention. At ease, she said as she entered. The room relaxed marginally, though all eyes remained fixed on her, on the silver star that now bore a small black band around its edge, the SEAL team's symbol of mourning. Today we're going to talk about something that won't be in your manual, she began. We're going to talk about what it means when the system fails, and all you have left is your integrity. As she spoke, she noticed among the candidates a young woman with familiar determination in her eyes. After the session, the candidate approached her. "Commander Blackwood, I'm Ensign Martina Kapoor. Elijah was my brother." Blackwood felt her chest tighten. "Your brother was one of the finest operators I've ever served with. He wrote about you in his letters, said you were what a leader should be." Kapoor hesitated. "I wanted to thank you for making sure the truth came out." Blackwood nodded, words momentarily failing her. "Is it true what they're saying?" Kapoor asked. "That there's going to be a formal review of all denied extraction requests from the last 5 years?" "Yes. The Military Transparency Act is moving through Congress now. It will create new oversight protocols for high-risk operations and emergency extractions." Kapoor straightened slightly. "Then my brother didn't die for nothing." "No," Blackwood agreed. "He didn't." As Blackwood continued her day, she was called to her office for an unexpected phone call. It was Hargrove, now working for a veterans advocacy group focused on accountability in military operations. "I've been reviewing the case of a Marine who was denied proper medical evaluation after reporting symptoms of traumatic brain injury," he said without preamble. "His command pressured him to continue deployment. He subsequently collapsed during a patrol and is now permanently disabled." "Why are you telling me this?" Blackwood asked. "Because his appeals have been denied twice. He needs someone who understands the system from the inside, someone who knows how to navigate the bureaucracy while maintaining the pressure of public accountability." Blackwood understood what he wasn't directly saying. "Are you asking for my help, Judge Hargrove?" "I'm asking if you're still in the business of fighting for the truth, Commander." Blackwood touched the silver star on her uniform, feeling its weight, not just the medal itself, but what it represented. The lives lost, the promises made, the truth finally acknowledged. "Send me the file," she said. "I'll see what I can do." In his new office, Hargrove looked at a framed newspaper article on his wall. "Military Transparency Act passes Senate, inspired by Operation Broken Arrow revelations." In smaller print beneath the headline, "New legislation creates independent review board for high-risk operation protocols." Next to it hung a simple frame containing 3 names: Kapoor, Rivas, Nakamura. Some battles were fought with weapons, others with truth. Both required courage, and both exacted a price. But, as Blackwood had said, some prices were worth paying. On her desk at the training facility, Blackwood activated a tablet showing the final version of the Military Transparency Act. She scrolled to the dedication page, reading the words she had helped craft. "In honor of those who gave their lives in service to truth, justice, and their fellow warriors. Their sacrifice will not be redacted from history. If you believe standing up for the truth matters even when it costs you everything, share your thoughts below. What would you have done in Blackwood's position? Subscribe to see the conclusion of this story about courage, accountability, and the true meaning of honor." The sound of Admiral Quinlan and Senator Khalidi entering Judge Hargrove's chambers seemed to freeze time for a moment. Blackwood stood perfectly still, the tablet on the desk still displaying the final moments of Operation Broken Arrow. Hargrove's face had drained of color as he looked from the visitors to Blackwood and back again. "Judge Hargrove," Admiral Quinlan said formally, his eyes flickering briefly to the tablet before returning to the judge. "The Armed Services Committee has questions about Operation Broken Arrow." "I imagine they do," Hargrove replied. He looked at Blackwood, who had stepped back and was preparing to leave. "Wait." The simple command halted her movement. She turned, her posture military precise as always, face unreadable. Hargrove opened his desk drawer and removed her silver star. The metal caught the light as he approached her. With careful, deliberate movements that betrayed a slight tremor in his hands, he pinned it back onto her uniform. "This doesn't belong to me," he said quietly. "Nor does it solely belong to you. I understand that now." Something shifted in Blackwood's eyes. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. The metal between them represented more than valor. It represented truth finally faced. Hargrove turned to Quinlan and Khalidi. "I believe I have some explaining to do, and it starts with acknowledging what happened to Onyx's team." As Blackwood left the chambers, she walked through the courthouse hallway where military personnel had gathered, some from the hearing, others who had arrived after seeing the news. As she passed, each one stood at attention, a silent salute that required no orders. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. Some honors transcend medals. Some truths demand recognition. Later that afternoon, footage from Hargrove's chambers mysteriously appeared online. The recording, apparently from the chamber's security system, showed the judge returning the Silver Star to Blackwood. It became the most shared video across social media platforms within hours. The image of the humble judge and stoic officer, a powerful visual shorthand for accountability finally taking hold. 1 week later, Blackwood sat before Senator Khaledi's committee in a congressional hearing room. The focus was no longer on her actions during Operation Broken Arrow, but on the systemic failures that had led to the disaster. Lieutenant Commander, Senator Khaledi began, in your professional assessment, what procedural failures allowed these communication and command breakdowns to occur? Blackwood's testimony was measured and technical. She spoke about the information silos between operational theaters, about classification levels preventing effective coordination, about outdated extraction protocols that prioritized operational secrecy over personnel safety in ambiguous situations. The issue wasn't individual decision-making, she explained. It was a system that forced impossible choices under pressure without clear guidelines for weighing competing priorities. When asked directly if she had leaked the classified documents, she answered with careful precision, "I believe in accountability, Senator, at all levels." Khaledi seemed to understand the non-answer for what it was. "And what about personal accountability, Commander? Do you believe Judge Hargrove should be held personally responsible for the deaths of your team members?" Blackwood paused, considering her words. The room fell silent, everyone leaning forward slightly to hear her response. Judge Hargrove was one link in a chain of command that failed that day, she finally said. Focusing exclusively on him would miss the larger systemic failures that need to be addressed. That's a very diplomatic answer, Commander. It's an honest one, Senator. Revenge is easy, reform is harder. The hearings continued for days, expanding to include testimony from the Secretary of Defense and other officials involved in Operation Broken Arrow. A complete picture emerged of cascading failures, territorial disputes between agencies, communication breakdowns, and a culture of risk aversion that ultimately cost 3 lives. Through it all, Blackwood remained composed. Her testimony focused on improvements rather than blame. When asked about the most critical reforms needed, she emphasized 3 points: transparent after-action reviews, clearer extraction protocols prioritizing wounded personnel, and protected channels for field commanders to report command failures without fear of retaliation. Veterans groups rallied around her, but she declined all interview requests and public appearances. This wasn't about her, she insisted in her single public statement. It was about ensuring that what happened to Onyx's team never happened again. On a clear autumn evening, Blackwood stood before 3 headstones at Arlington National Cemetery. The graves had been there for months, but the headstones were new, now properly marked with "Killed in Action, Operation Broken Arrow," rather than the vague "died in service to their country" that had originally been engraved. Other seals gathered silently around her, forming a circle of respect. Among them, unexpectedly, was Judge Hargrove, now in civilian clothes. As the others gradually dispersed, he approached. "The secretary resigned this morning," he said quietly. "I heard. And the Judicial Ethics Committee has recommended my recusal from all military oversight cases pending further review." Blackwood nodded but said nothing, her attention still on the headstones. "Commander?" Hargrove hesitated, searching for words. "What made you come to my chambers that day? You could have let me fall." Blackwood looked at him directly. "Because revenge is easy, sir. Justice is harder." She touched one of the headstones gently. "And they deserve justice." Hargrove nodded slowly, understanding the distinction. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the hearing, but for that day. For not finding another way." "There's always another way," Blackwood replied. "We just have to be willing to see it." The sun was setting as they stood there, casting long shadows across the perfectly aligned headstones. In the fading light, both the judge and the commander were just 2 veterans honoring fallen comrades. The artificial hierarchies of rank and position temporarily set aside in the presence of ultimate sacrifice. A month later, Blackwood reported for her new assignment at Naval Special Warfare Command. Her prosthetic leg was now a familiar part of her gait steady and confident as she entered the training facility where SEAL candidates waited at attention. "At ease," she said. The room relaxed slightly, though all eyes remained fixed on her. On the silver star that now bore a small black band around its edge, the SEAL team symbol of mourning. "Today we're going to talk about something that won't be in your manual," she began. "We're going to talk about what it means when the system fails, and all you have left is your integrity." As she spoke, she noticed among the candidates a young woman with familiar determination in her eyes. After the session, the candidate approached her. "Commander Blackwood, I'm Ensign Martina Kapoor. Elijah was my brother." Blackwood felt her chest tighten. "Your brother was one of the finest operators I've ever served with. He wrote about you in his letters, said you were what a leader should be." Kapoor hesitated. "I wanted to thank you for making sure the truth came out." Blackwood nodded, words momentarily failing her. The weight of her responsibility to the fallen had never felt more tangible than in this moment, facing the sister who had followed her brother into service. "Is it true what they're saying?" Kapoor asked. "That there's going to be a formal review of all denied extraction requests from the last 5 years?" "Yes. The Military Transparency Act is moving through Congress now. It will create new oversight protocols and an independent review board for high-risk operations." Kapoor straightened slightly. "Then my brother didn't die for nothing?" "No," Blackwood agreed. "He didn't." As her day continued, Blackwood was called to her office for an unexpected call. It was Hargrove, now working for a veterans advocacy organization, focusing on accountability in military operations. "I've been reviewing the case of a Marine who was denied proper medical evaluation after reporting symptoms of traumatic brain injury," he said without preamble. His command pressured him to continue deployment. He subsequently collapsed during a patrol and is now permanently disabled. "Why are you telling me this?" Blackwood asked, though she already suspected. "Because his appeals have been denied twice. He needs someone who understands the system from the inside, someone who knows how to navigate the bureaucracy while maintaining the pressure of public accountability." Blackwood understood what he wasn't directly saying. "Are you asking for my help, Judge Hargrove?" "I'm saying these men need an advocate who understands the cost of silence." Blackwood touched the silver star on her uniform, feeling its weight. Not just the medal itself, but what it represented. The lives lost, the promises made, the truth finally acknowledged. "Send me the file," she said. "I'll see what I can do." In his new office, Hargrove looked at a framed newspaper article on his wall. "Military Transparency Act passes Senate, inspired by Operation Broken Arrow revelations." In smaller print beneath, "New legislation creates independent review board for high-risk operation protocols." Next to it hung a simple frame containing 3 names: Kapoor, Rivas, Nakamura. Some battles were fought with weapons, others with truth. Both required courage, and both exacted a price. But, as Blackwood had said, some prices were worth paying. The Military Transparency Act moved through Congress with unusual speed, driven by public outrage over the Broken Arrow revelations and supported by a coalition of veterans groups. When it passed the Senate with a veto-proof majority, few were surprised. What did surprise many was the prominent role Judge Hargrove played in advocating for its passage, testifying before congressional committees about the flaws in the existing system that he had once been part of. "We ask our service members to make impossible choices in combat," he told the Senate Armed Services Committee. "The least we can do is ensure that the system supporting them is worthy of their sacrifice." Blackwood watched his testimony from her office at the training center, noting the changes in the man. Gone was the judicial arrogance, replaced by something more humble, but perhaps more powerful, the authority of someone who had faced his own failures and chosen to learn from them. 6 months after the courthouse confrontation, Blackwood stood in the East Room of the White House as the president signed the Military Transparency Act into law. As one of the key advisors who had helped shape the legislation, she had been invited to the signing ceremony along with the families of the fallen Onyx team members. The Kapoor, Rivas, and Nakamura families stood together near the front, their presence a powerful reminder of why the legislation mattered. Blackwood had spent hours with each family, sharing stories about their loved ones that had been classified until now. Not the operational details, but the human moments that had been denied them in the sanitized official accounts of their deaths. After the ceremony, Nakamura's father approached Blackwood. "My son wrote to us about you," he said quietly. "In his last letter, he said if anything happened to him, you would make it right." Blackwood felt a tightness in her throat. "I tried, sir." "You did more than try," he replied, gesturing toward the signed legislation. "You succeeded." That evening, a small private ceremony was held at the Pentagon. Blackwood had been instrumental in arranging it, working with Admiral Quinlan to ensure that proper recognition was finally given to the fallen members of Onyx team. The posthumous Silver Stars awarded to Kapoor, Rivas, and Nakamura were long overdue. Their families accepted the medals with quiet dignity, and Blackwood stood at attention throughout, her own Silver Star with its black mourning band visible on her uniform. As she watched the proceedings, her mind returned to the helicopter evacuation from Operation Broken Arrow, herself barely conscious, her leg a mangled mess, being told that she was the only survivor. The crushing weight of that knowledge had nearly broken her. But standing here now, witnessing their sacrifice finally acknowledged, some small measure of peace began to take root. After the ceremony, Admiral Quinlan approached her. "The Secretary has approved your recommendation for the Joint Operational Review Team," he informed her. "You'll be working with representatives from all service branches to implement the new protocols under the Transparency Act." "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me, Commander. This was never about doing you a favor." He gestured toward the families still gathered around the awarded medals. "This is about making sure we do better by all of them." Blackwood nodded. "Yes, sir. There's one more thing. Judge Hargrove has been named as the civilian oversight representative on the team." Blackwood's expression remained neutral. "I'm aware. I recommended him." Quinlan raised an eyebrow. "Did you now? Some might consider that an unusual choice given your history." "He understands the cost of the old system better than most, sir, and he has nothing left to lose by pushing for real change." The Admiral studied her for a moment. "You continue to surprise me, Commander." "Just doing my job, sir." "No, you're redefining it. There's a difference." 1 year to the day after the courthouse hearing, where Blackwood had been ordered to surrender her medal, she stood before a new class of special operations candidates. The training facility had been renamed the Onyx Team Special Operations Center, a change that had required special authorization, but had ultimately been approved at the highest levels. "The most important quality in a special operator isn't physical strength," she told the candidates. "It isn't tactical knowledge or weapons proficiency. It's moral courage, the willingness to do what's right, especially when doing so comes at personal cost." As she spoke, her gaze swept across the room, noting with satisfaction that the current class included more women than any previous one. Among them was Ensign Kapoor, now halfway through the grueling qualification process and performing at the top of her class. "You will face situations where the right course of action isn't clear," Blackwood continued, "where regulations conflict with reality on the ground, where following orders might mean abandoning core values. In those moments, remember that you serve something larger than any individual, any mission, or any command structure. You serve the truth." After dismissing the class, Blackwood returned to her office to find a package waiting on her desk. It bore no return address, but she recognized the handwriting. Inside was a simple wooden frame containing a photograph, her original Onyx team standing together, arms around each other's shoulders, faces grimy but grinning. It was the same photo she had kept in her quarters, but this version wasn't worn or creased. It looked new. A note accompanied it. "Found this in the archives. Thought you might want an official copy for the training center. H." Blackwood studied the photograph, her fingers tracing the faces of her lost teammates. Then she noticed something she hadn't before. In the background, partly obscured but recognizable, was a younger Colonel Hargrove, observing the team from a distance. The man had always been there, connected to her story, in ways she hadn't initially understood. She placed the frame on the wall of her office, next to the signed copy of the Military Transparency Act. Together, they represented both loss and progress, failure and redemption. The full circle of a journey that had begun with denial and ended with acknowledgement. That afternoon, Blackwood received a call from Hargrove. The review board has approved the Marine's case, he informed her. Full medical benefits and back pay authorized. Good, she replied. He deserved better. We have 12 more cases pending review, all similar patterns. Denied medical care, command pressure to continue despite clear medical contraindications. Send them over. I'll review them tonight. There was a pause on the line. You know, Commander, when I requested to preside over your hearing last year, I thought I was protecting the system. I believed the greater good required individual sacrifices. And now I understand that no system is worth preserving if it requires burying the truth. After the call ended, Blackwood walked to the memorial wall that had been installed at the training center. 3 photographs hung there permanently. Kapoor, Rivas, and Nakamura, in their service portraits, with their dates of birth and death, and a simple inscription, Operation Broken Arrow, they never stopped fighting. She stood before the memorial, reflecting on how much had changed in a year. The system hadn't been completely reformed. Bureaucracies changed slowly, and resistance to transparency remained entrenched in certain quarters. But cracks had appeared in the wall of secrecy, and through those cracks, light was beginning to shine. That evening, as she worked late reviewing case files, her phone rang. It was Admiral Quinlan. Just received word that the President has approved the operational review team's recommendations, he told her. New extraction protocols will be implemented across all theaters effective next month. All theaters, even the classified ones? All of them, no exceptions. Blackwood allowed herself a small smile. That's good news, sir. There's more. The Secretary wants you to head the implementation task force. It would mean a promotion to captain. She hadn't expected that. I appreciate the offer, Admiral, but I believe I'm more effective in my current role. The training program is showing results, and we're developing a new generation of operators who understand that courage means more than physical bravery. Quinlan chuckled. I told the Secretary you'd say that. He said to inform you that it wasn't a request, Captain Blackwood. The promotion paperwork has already been processed. After hanging up, Blackwood sat in silence for a moment. Then she opened her desk drawer and removed a small box containing the commander's insignia she'd worn since before Operation Broken Arrow. Setting them aside, she closed the drawer and returned to the case files. Ranks changed, titles changed, but the work remained the same, ensuring that those who served received the truth, accountability, and support they deserved. 2 years after the courthouse confrontation, Captain Tyrannus Blackwood stood on the deck of an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf, observing a training exercise. Beside her stood Judge Hargrove, now serving as the permanent civilian representative on the Joint Special Operations Oversight Committee. The new extraction protocols were tested in real conditions last week, she informed him. SEAL team pinned down in the mountains, 2 wounded, immediate extraction authorized despite ongoing surveillance operations in the area. And the outcome? All personnel recovered, both wounded stable. The surveillance operation adjusted and continued with minimal disruption. Hargrove nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. The system is learning. Slowly, Blackwood qualified. There's still resistance. Of course there is. Change is never easy, especially for institutions built on tradition and hierarchy. He gazed out at the vast expanse of ocean surrounding them. But it's happening. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, 2 people who had begun as adversaries and become reluctant allies in a cause larger than either of them. I received a letter from Nakamura's mother yesterday, Hargrove said eventually. She's starting a foundation for families of fallen special operators. She asked if I would serve on the board. Will you? I said yes. It feels like the right thing to do. Blackwood nodded. It is. Later that day, she visited the carrier's medical bay, where a young SEAL was recovering from injuries sustained during a training exercise. As she approached his bed, she noticed him trying to sit up straighter, despite obvious pain. At ease, petty officer, she said. Save your strength for healing. Yes, ma'am. He settled back, eyeing her prosthetic leg visible below her uniform pants. If you don't mind me asking, Captain, was that from Broken Arrow? Blackwood nodded. It was. They teach us about that operation now, about what went wrong and what was done to fix it. He hesitated. They say you're the reason we have the new extraction protocols. Not just me, she corrected. A lot of people worked to change the system. But you started it. You stood up when no one else would. Blackwood thought about that as she left the medical bay. Had she started it? Or had she simply been the catalyst for a change that had already been gathering momentum beneath the surface? Perhaps it didn't matter. What mattered was that change had come, and with it, a measure of justice for those who had fallen. Back in her temporary quarters on the carrier, she opened her laptop to find a message from Ensign Kapoor, now Lieutenant Kapoor, recently assigned to her first operational team. The message contained a photograph, Kapoor with her new teammates, arms around each other's shoulders in an echo of that old Onyx team photo. The caption read simply, "Carrying on the legacy." Blackwood felt a tightness in her throat as she studied the image. This was why it had all been worth it, not just for justice for the fallen, but for those who would follow, who would serve under better conditions because someone had been willing to stand up for truth. She touched the silver star on her uniform, the black mourning band now faded but still visible. Some honors were bestowed by institutions. Others were earned in moments of moral choice that no one might ever see or recognize. Both had value, but she had learned which mattered more. 3 years to the day after the courthouse confrontation, Captain Blackwood stood before a gathering at the newly dedicated Onyx Team Memorial at Naval Special Warfare Command. The simple stone monument bore the names of not just her fallen teammates, but all special operators who had died in classified operations over the previous decade. Names that had once been hidden behind redaction and secrecy, but were now acknowledged publicly. As she prepared to speak, she looked out at the assembled crowd, military personnel, family members, government officials, and at the back, Judge Hargrove, now retired but still active in veterans advocacy work. "There are medals given for valor in battle," she began, "for wounds suffered in combat, for exceptional service to country. But there is no medal for those who stand alone against a system designed to bury the truth. No recognition for the quiet warriors who fight not just on battlefields, but in courtrooms and committee hearings." She touched her silver star briefly. "Their honor lies in the lives they change, the truths they protect, and the standards they uphold when no one else will." As she continued speaking, her eyes found Lieutenant Kapoor in the crowd, standing tall in her uniform, the legacy of her brother evident in her bearing and commitment. Behind Kapoor stood a new generation of operators, trained under protocols that valued both mission success and personnel welfare, that recognized the human cost of every operational decision. And sometimes, Blackwood concluded, that's enough. After the ceremony, as people dispersed, she found herself alone before the monument. Tracing the engraved names with her fingers, she felt a sense of completion that had eluded her for years. Not closure, that suggested an ending, and this work would never truly end. But a circle completed, a promise fulfilled. The silver star on her uniform caught the light as she turned to leave, the black mourning band now a permanent part of the medal. A reminder that honor was not just about recognition received, but about truths defended and promises kept, even when doing so came at the highest personal cost. And in that moment, for Lieutenant Commander Tyrannus Blackwood, now Captain Blackwood, that was more than enough. It was everything. What would you risk to stand up for the truth? Have you ever witnessed someone sacrifice their own interest to do what's right? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe to explore more stories about courage, integrity, and the quiet heroes who change the world without seeking recognition.